On a quiet March night in 2014, Danielle Lockyer's life took a tragic turn. What started as a regular evening for the young girl quickly became something far more unsettling. She believed she was heading to meet someone she cared about, hoping to fix a broken relationship. But instead of finding reconciliation, Danielle unknowingly stepped into a carefully laid trap by someone she once trusted. What happened next would change everything. Danielle Locklear was born on July 10, 1998, in North Carolina, USA. From the moment she was born, Danielle brought immense joy to her mother, as well as to her maternal grandparents. Danielle's extended family included her great-grandmother and especially her aunt China, who loved and cared for her as if she were a little sister. Danielle's family on her mother's side was large and young, so the age gap between Danielle and her Aunt China was not significant. Although the details of her parents' relationship remain unclear, it's known that after Danielle was born, her mother started a relationship with a man named Donnie Locklear. The new family settled in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and Danielle took on her stepfather's last name, Locklear. Living further away, Danielle could only spend time with her father's family during school holidays and special occasions like Thanksgiving or Christmas. When her mother and Donnie's relationship ended bitterly, Danielle found comfort and support in her Aunt China and her maternal grandparents. Over time, her biological father remarried, while her mother also remarried, this time to a man named John. John became more than just a stepfather to Danielle. He embraced her as his own daughter, and his mother became a loving grandmother figure to her. Danielle's extended family grew with the addition of 3 half-siblings. On her mother's side, she had Donnie Ray Locklear Jr., the child of her mother and her second partner, while on her father's side, Trey and Jasling were born to her father and his second partner. As Danielle advanced through school, it became clear that she was a charismatic and natural leader. Those who knew her remember her love for cooking and her eagerness to explore her artistic and creative side. One of her favorite times of the year was visiting her grandmother's house. A particular story from her childhood highlights Danielle's deep compassion. During an elementary school science experiment, a strawberry plant was discarded, but Danielle rescued it from the trash, carrying it with her all day at school. When she got home, she carefully nurtured the plant, and during a visit to her grandmother's house, she insisted they save the plant together because she believed everything deserved a chance to live. That summer, Danielle took great care of the plant, tending to it with love and dedication. By 2013, Danielle was 15 years old and had blossomed into a beautiful young woman in her first year of high school. When she visited North Carolina, she would attend services at the Upper Room Prayer House with her family. In June of that year, she met a young man at church named Jamichael Malloy, who was a few years older and in his final year at Fayetteville High School. Jamichael had plans to join the U.S. Navy after graduation, with his best friend Dominic sharing the same aspiration. From the moment they met, there was an undeniable attraction between Jamichael and Danielle. When she returned to North Carolina to spend the summer with her grandparents and aunt, the two began dating. Near the end of the summer break, Danielle told her mother she was enjoying her time in North Carolina and wanted to transfer schools. Since she would be closer to her maternal family, the change felt natural, and she started a new chapter as a student at Southview High School. She relished the change of scenery and felt especially comfortable in her nutrition and food classes, often trying out new recipes at home with her grandmother. Baking cakes for any occasion became a passion for Danielle, as it allowed her to expand her knowledge by researching the latest techniques. She also loved gardening, never minding that some classmates teased her for enjoying agricultural work. Around this time, Danielle was considering a future career as either a nurse or a chef. But when it came to matters of the heart, she had no doubts. She was deeply in love with Jamichael. Her notebooks were filled with countless doodles of his name, and the sparkle in her eyes spoke volumes about her feelings for him. When she introduced Jamichael to her family, they were impressed by him. Her mother found him somewhat introverted but kind. However, as the weeks and months passed, their relationship revealed itself to be tumultuous, with frequent ups and downs that their loved ones attributed to the couple's youth and inexperience. Thanks to her talent and love for children, Danielle began working as an art instructor at the Youth for Christ camp. It didn't take long for the children to become enchanted with her. By the end of that year and the start of 2014, between school, her friendships, and her new boyfriend, Danielle's life seemed to be finally settling in North Carolina. Danielle and her friends often spent time by a creek in Hope Mills, a place where they could relax, dance, and listen to music. But as time went on, Jamichael's interest in Danielle waned. Although he kept it a secret, he began flirting with other girls. Finally, on Sunday, March 9, 2014, he broke up with Danielle. The news hit Danielle hard, and in her confusion and heartbreak, she told him she was pregnant, hoping it would make him reconsider. It wasn't true, but it was the only thing she could think of at the moment. However, Jamichael's reaction was not what Danielle had hoped for, leading to a heated argument between them. The confrontation escalated, with Jamichael threatening to harm her if she tried to contact him again. Desperate and distraught, Danielle later confided in her friend Caroline about what had happened. At home, she had no one to turn to for support, as her Aunt China and grandmother had to travel to Atlanta for a medical checkup, leaving Danielle in the care of her grandfather. On Tuesday, March 11, 2014, Danielle met up with her friends at the Hope Mills Creek. Hoping to cheer her up and bring back her usual smile, a friend suggested they compete together in a beauty pageant sponsored by the school, scheduled for later that month. Danielle loved the idea and excited about the upcoming event. The girls spent the afternoon taking photos, posing, and playing with the camera. Later that evening, back at home, Danielle told her grandfather she needed to drop off some school notes to a classmate. It was almost 10 p.m., so her grandfather asked her not to take too long and returned to his computer, knowing her classmate lived just a few blocks away. What Danielle's grandfather didn't know that night was that she wasn't heading to her classmate's house as she had said. Instead, the young girl was going to meet Jamichael. As the time for their meeting approached, Jamichael had installed a texting app on his phone, allowing him to send messages that appeared as though they were coming from his home, regardless of where he actually was. The meeting spot was by the Hope Mills Creek. At that late hour, with dense undergrowth surrounding the murky waters, the place was far from the peaceful refuge it had been earlier in the day when sunlight flooded the area. Jamichael didn't go alone. He was accompanied by his inseparable friend Dominic, who was driving the car they arrived in. In the trunk of the car were cement blocks and ropes. According to the subsequent reconstruction of events, while Dominic waited in the car, Danielle and her boyfriend got into a heated argument, Within moments, Jamichael overpowered her, grabbing her neck with both hands and squeezing until she lost consciousness. He and Dominic then loaded her into the car, not realizing that in the process, one of Danielle's socks had fallen into the underbrush. They drove to another part of the river, not far from Jamichael's home, where they tied cement blocks to her waist and disposed of her body in the water. In the early hours of Wednesday, March 12, 2014, Danielle's grandfather woke up and, finding her still not home, contacted China and his wife, who immediately began their journey back to North Carolina. On the way, China reached out to Jamichael to ask if he had seen her niece, but his denial only deepened their concern. In her growing distress, China called her sister, Danielle's mother, to inform her of the situation. At their request, the grandfather reported Danielle as missing to the police. Upon receiving the report, the authorities launched a search operation, joined by Danielle's loved ones. Aware that the creek was a favorite gathering spot for local teens, one of the first places China thought to check was the area near the creek. She didn't find her niece, but she did find a sock that belonged to Danielle, causing a sinking feeling in her stomach. Meanwhile, the authorities were left wondering if, instead of heading to her friend's house, Danielle had gone to the creek that night. One of her friends confirmed to investigators that she had only seen Danielle earlier that day at the creek and provided them with the photos they had taken there. It wasn't until investigators interviewed another friend that they learned about Danielle's recent breakup with Jamichael. They began to consider the possibility that she had gone to see him instead of her classmate. The detectives sought out the 17-year-old boy, who claimed that Danielle had been so upset about their breakup that he had blocked her number, insisting he hadn't spoken to her in days. He even claimed that he still loved her. When asked where he was the night Danielle disappeared, Jamichael said he was at home with his friend Dominic and willingly handed over his cell phone to the detectives. Forensic technology experts analyzed the device and were surprised to find text messages in which Danielle had told her boyfriend that she was pregnant with his child. As the investigation continued, the lack of new developments plunged Danielle's loved ones into deeper despair, a torment shared by her friends and classmates. When Danielle's best friend spoke with Jamichael about the situation through social media, he mentioned how depressed he was feeling. As the search dragged on March 18, 2014, Jamichael took a polygraph test, which yielded unfavorable results for him. Despite this, he continued to deny any involvement in Danielle's disappearance. At the same time, the analysis of his cell phone revealed that he had exchanged text messages with other girls on the night of March 11th, seemingly confirming he had been at home. To uncover new leads, detectives reviewed surveillance footage from a camera near the creek and requested Danielle's cell phone records. Using digital data, they retraced her steps from that day, discovering that the last signal from her phone had been at 10:40 p.m. near a cell tower. However, despite combing the area, they couldn't locate her phone. After the FBI became involved in the search, images of Danielle were released to the media in hopes of generating leads. Her case soon became a national news story. Meanwhile, her family and friends made flyers, posted them around town, and continued searching for her on their own. During some of these search efforts, Jamichael even joined in, but no trace of the young girl was found. That was until Wednesday, April 2nd, 2014, 28 days after Danielle's disappearance. An off-duty officer spotted what appeared to be a partially submerged body in the South River, about 20 miles from Hope Mills. Upon receiving the alert, a team of investigators arrived at the scene to conduct a recovery operation. Once the body was pulled from the water, although formal identification was still pending, a detective was nearly certain it was Danielle. Tragically, the detective's instincts were correct. It was determined that the remains belonged to the missing teenager. According to the police, Danielle's death was caused by asphyxiation due to airway obstruction. Additionally, the autopsy confirmed that she was not pregnant. As Danielle's family faced the most devastating moment of their lives, the police shifted the focus of the case, now investigating it as a violent crime. Both Jamichael's connection to the victim and the proximity of the body's discovery to his home made him the prime suspect. Consequently, the police conducted a search of his residence. As the police later acknowledged, his experience had taught him that coincidences don't exist. During the search, they found cement blocks and ropes very similar to those used to weigh down Danielle, leading to another round of questioning for Jamichael. But despite the mounting evidence, he continued to deny any involvement. When it was Dominic's turn, the 18-year-old also refused to speak with the police. However, 4 days later, Jamichael finally confessed. It was then that the police learned he had used an app to make it appear as though his texts on the night of the crime had been sent from his home. On Tuesday, April 8, 2014, Jamichael was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. Hours later, Dominic met the same fate. The next day, both were arraigned. Jamichael was charged with second-degree murder and his accomplice with conspiracy to commit a crime. Both were held in the Cumberland County Jail without bail. Within 24 hours, Dominic was also charged with the same crime as his friend. Danielle's family felt deeply betrayed by the young man they had welcomed into their lives, a sentiment echoed by her friends, who couldn't stop repeating that she was the kindest and most beautiful girl of all, the last person who deserved such a fate. On Thursday, April 10, 2014, around 250 students gathered for a vigil to pray for Danielle. The service, held outside Southview High School, was organized by a religious club. Attendees carried signs with messages dedicated to the deceased teenager and found solace in sharing memories of her. Danielle's best friend told a local news outlet that she was overwhelmed with mixed emotions. On the one hand, her Christian faith prevented her from hating Jamichael, but on the other she couldn't help but feel repulsed by what he had done to her friend. Despite the pain, she said she hoped to compete in the beauty pageant as a final tribute to Danielle. On Sunday, April 20th, in an effort to raise money for the victim's family, a community member organized a memorial walk in Danielle's honor. The well-attended event featured the presence of Danielle's mother and her sister China, who received an outpouring of support and kindness from the attendees. The organizers raised over $3,000 to help cover the costs of Danielle's funeral services. Nearly 2 weeks later, on Saturday, May 4th, Danielle's funeral was held. As images of the smiling girl were projected on giant screens, her large family couldn't hold back their tears. As the funeral attendees quietly moved through the aisles, passing boxes of tissues, a somber atmosphere filled the church. Among the crowd, some wore shirts with Danielle's face printed on them, while others carried pink flowers, one of her favorite colors. Beneath the folding screens, the white casket holding the remains of the young girl was surrounded by floral arrangements. The pastor of the church addressed the congregation, stating that the loss of a child is always the hardest tragedy to bear, regardless of the circumstances. At the conclusion of the service, 6 men escorted the casket out of the sanctuary. One of the detectives joined the funeral procession, paying his respects despite never having met Danielle. Other attendees, many of whom hadn't known her personally, also approached to express their condolences. Danielle was laid to rest in a private ceremony in Haute-Reville, 18 miles away from her home. It wasn't until the following year that Dominic pleaded guilty to being an accomplice to first-degree murder, leaving his case awaiting sentencing. The next significant development in the legal proceedings occurred in 2016, specifically on March 7th, when the possibility of a plea deal for Jamichael was discussed in court. The deal would grant him parole eligibility after 25 years. The judge gave the defense a month to decide. Meanwhile, on Friday, March 11, 2016, marking the second anniversary of Danielle's tragic death, her family organized an event not only to commemorate her life but also to raise awareness about domestic violence. That evening, gathered at the Outreville Community Center, family, friends, and neighbors attended a concert aimed at raising funds for victims of domestic violence and their families. Danielle's grandmother spoke at the event, highlighting that in many cases, victims are betrayed by those who should love and protect them the most. She stressed the urgent need for young women to understand that there is no justification for enduring abuse. 2 months later, in the Cumberland County Courthouse, Jamichael accepted the plea deal offered by the prosecution and pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. During the hearing, the district attorney presented the details of the case. Afterward, both the accused and his mother apologized to Danielle's family, who filled one side of the courtroom, wearing pink ribbons in her honor. Addressing the accused, some family members expressed their anger through tears, noting that it would be a long time before they could consider forgiveness. Among those who spoke was Danielle's grieving mother. She told the court how the accused had robbed her of the chance to see her daughter graduate from high school or walk down the aisle, taking away a piece of her own soul in the process. Finally, the judge sentenced Jamichael to 25 to 31 years in prison for the crime against Danielle Locklear. The following month, the sentencing hearing for Dominic, the other defendant in the case, took place. Dominic apologized to Danielle's mother and the rest of the family, admitting that he had made a grave mistake in agreeing to help his friend dispose of the body. He was subsequently sentenced to 6 to 8 years in prison for his role in the crime. According to court records, Dominic was released after serving nearly 8.5 years. Meanwhile, Jamichael remains incarcerated in North Carolina. In the years since his sentencing, prison records indicate that Jamichael has committed 29 infractions, including 3 incidents of tampering with locks, 2 cases of weapons possession, and several instances of gang involvement. Additionally, the documentation references an assault with a weapon and a threat to prison staff. As of now, his projected release date is October 6, 2042. Danielle's mother shared with a local news outlet that Jamichael had sent her several letters from prison, but she never opened them. Meanwhile, the strawberry plant that her beloved daughter had planted with her grandmother remains alive. Not only that, but it continues to blossom and bear fruit each spring, just as Danielle's short life will forever continue to bloom, filling her loved ones with love and kindness. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.